challenge that affects so many companies, and by extension, so many people. So many lives are changed poorly for this reason. Can we distill from what we've talked about so far why we really are terrible at developing these leaders? What's really in the way? I think you've touched on this, but let's kind of reinforce that.
I think it has to do, if you really want to paint a big picture, it has to do with the way we view education. But the idea that if I want to train, if I want to develop your leadership, what I have to do is I have to share a bunch of ideas with you that make sense and that are smart and that will help you lead, and you're going to absorb those ideas and then change your behavior. And there was this great Far Side cartoon that I saw once, which had a scientist and who was writing equations all over a wall. And there were a group of other scientists who were watching him. And he had a whole bunch of equations on one side, and then he had an arrow to a whole bunch of other equations on this side. And over the arrow, he had written the words, "Then a miracle occurs," right? And the scientist, the text of the cartoon was, and it was sort of step 1, and then step 2, then a miracle occurs, and then step 3, all the other equations. Yeah. And the scientist was raising his hand saying, "I have a question about step 2." And I think that's a little bit how we think about development, right? Which is that we give all of this information, and then kind of a miracle occurs, and then you're able to do all that stuff perfectly. And it's that transition between I know what to do and I'm actually doing it that's a massive gap, right? It's a massive gap in organizations. And leadership development, for the most part, does a great job at teaching us what it is that we should do, and a terrible job at helping us to transition that into day-to-day behavior. So you have a tremendous number of leaders, of people who are really smart, who really have a sense of what it is that needs to happen, and who aren't particularly good at making that happen in their organizations. So it's not a crisis of knowledge. It's a crisis of ability, capability, of implementation, of execution. And that's not something you get from sitting in a classroom taking notes from what someone's telling you.
Sure. And it sounds like a familiar classic problem of business development or growth, where best laid plans, you can't really execute.
Right.
It's like, no, it didn't really happen.
Right.
Right.